Welcome to this week's episode of the Ask the R podcast. You probably clicked on this video because you're tired of hearing excuses. Every planning delay at the moment, well, it seems like it's being blamed on ecology, trees, or bats. But here's the part no one tells you. It's not the surveys that are holding up your project, it's the broken planning system behind them. In the next few minutes, I'll explain why your local authority is running at half capacity and how that's quietly destroying progress for everybody. Hi gang, welcome to the Ask the R podcast, where this week we're talking about the elephant in the room, planning delays. So over the next 15 minutes or so, I'll explain why your local authority is running at half capacity and how that's quietly destroying the planning process for pretty much everybody involved. But first this. Hi folks, it's time for You Couldn't Plan It, the feature where me and my team have scoured the internet for stupid, silly and downright infuriating planning related facts. Let's go. Yes, let's go. So this one here is quite interesting. It's actually quite old, this one, but I think it's worth going back over. So this is something called the Kelston Toll Road, and this Kelston Toll Road was an unofficial temporary toll road in a village in Somerset in England, and it was not even 400 metres in length, and it ran across a field adjacent to a section of the A431 that was shut for some works, and it basically meant that it circumvented the local authorities' suggested detour, which was 14 miles long. The road was built as an unofficial toll road, and it was built without planning permission, which the council later forced the operator to apply for retrospectively. But yeah, this bad boy. So the actual A431 was closed through the village of Kelston due to fears of a landslip. On the 17th of February 2014, the council said that they would build a temporary road to replace it. But due to the impact of the closure on local businesses and journey times, this local guy, Mike Watts, who was an entrepreneur, and his partner Wendy, they decided to construct the toll road. They built it at a price to themselves of 150 grand, and that meant that 1,000 cars would have to use the road daily for them to break even. They were charging a couple of quid for a car, and there's some pictures on Wikipedia of the toll booth and everything. It looks very impressive. They opened the toll road coming up for over 10 years ago now, the 1st of August 2014. The public, so the local residents, were well up for this, and they thought it was brilliant, but the council forced them basically to apply for retrospective planning permission, and this was delayed until after the road was closed. I'm just trying to work out what the costs were. The reopening of the affected section of the A431 was 4 weeks earlier than the council had originally promised, and because of this, the guy that built it estimates he had a shortfall of 10 grand despite the road having over 163,000 journeys. Anyway, eventually it was put back to fields in 2015, so that's absolutely brilliant, isn't it? So it ended up costing him pretty much 10 grand to do that, but I mean, that's entrepreneurship at the top level, isn't it? So there we go, that's one. So back to the episode, and this one we're talking about planning delays, and actually I've got another article up here because I think we spoke about this before. I wrote an article about this, I think, on LinkedIn. So in June this year, the Prime Minister unveiled a new AI system that the government was going to use, which could basically scan hundreds of files in seconds, making it easier for planning officers to assess applications. So he unveiled that at London Tech Week. The problem is the system is called Extract, and it's been made available to all councils, and it's going to be fully rolled out by spring 2026 apparently. And it says Google's DeepMind's Gemini. I think they mean Google's Gemini model. So it'll be interesting to see. We use AI a lot within our business, and that's actually not the best model for assessing that sort of stuff. So whether the government has wasted millions of pounds on that or not, I don't know. That's a very simple tool which actually you could build in about 15 minutes if you know what you're doing. So yeah, and then the article goes on to comment about that. So is it ecologists causing delays to the planning system? Well, I don't believe so. I think the causes of delays are purely down to underfunding within the local planning authority. That's the biggest one, and also staffing. Since the introduction of biodiversity net gain, we've seen a real slowing in applications getting determined. But from what I can see, the officers are just absolutely snowed under. The other elephant in the room is what I call the 6 Ps, which is prior planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance. And this is where, and I think all of us, have to take responsibility for this, is that sometimes the planning applications that go in, they're not particularly well formulated. There hasn't been a lot of thought put into them. There is, within the UK, in the decades that I've been involved with the planning system, there tends to be it permeates through the system, this attitude of, well, we'll just submit the application and then we'll see what happens and we'll deal with it on the back end. And I just don't think that approach works. It just adds massive amounts of delay into the system. So, in terms of delays, they're underfunded, they're overworked. I think some of the applications that go in really aren't of particularly good quality, and I think they're overstretched as well. There's a lot of graduates working in that space at the moment, and they're getting absolutely hammered into the floor. And ultimately, I think if we all want faster planning, I think it's a great idea for the local planning authorities and for the government to roll out AI tools to local planning authorities, but it has to be done the right way. I just don't think that governments and local authorities are very good at spending money. We don't get good value for the money that we throw at them, and perhaps they should be allowed to use some of the funds from local planning authorities, from planning applications, to invest back into their own systems. So there we go. We'll see where that one goes. But yeah, I mean, it needs to be funded properly. We need better templates. There needs to be trust built up between all parties instead of just hiding behind emails. Planning in the UK is not broken because of nature. It's broken because of neglect. So, if you've ever been told that it's trees and ecology that are holding up your planning application, I don't believe that's the case. Share this podcast around. So, what have we got next? It is now time for... You've got the questions, the planning system's a nightmare. We have got the answers. Welcome to the Planning Permission Panic Line. Yes, folks, it is a planning permission panic line. There's only a few left on this one. I'm going to have to do a push and get some more in. So this question here is in from Josh in Plymouth, and Josh says, I've heard we might need a great crested newt license. What does that mean for timelines? Well, what does it mean? Full stop. So, great crested newts are a protected species. If your site has got suitable terrestrial habitat, land-based habitat, and there are ponds that could be used for breeding within 250, 300 metres of the site, then you are going to have those ponds assessed as part of your planning application, and that is normally picked up in something called a preliminary ecological appraisal. So the preliminary ecological appraisal will involve a desktop search of publicly available and some not publicly available resources to see what, if any, records there are of great crested newts in your local area. We would also look to see what colour risk zone you're in, red, amber, green, and that will help inform how the local authority will react to the application as well. If there are ponds on site, then what would happen is there would be a habitat suitability index survey carried out there, which doesn't prove presence or absence, just gives a high level overview as to whether that pond is likely to be suitable. If that pond is likely to be suitable, we then need to prove presence or absence, and that's usually done now with eDNA testing. So a water sample is taken in a certain window at a certain time of the year. It is seasonally dependent. That gets sent away to a lab, and they'll assess to see whether there's any DNA of newts in the water. If there is, that usually means they're breeding there. At that point, you've got two choices. One is you can do traditional surveys to work out population size and apply for a license from wherever you are, Natural England, Nature Scot, Natural Resources Wales. Or if it's active in your local area, you can enter your site into something called the district level licensing scheme, which is essentially pay to play. So even if you had newts there, you'll pay some money and the habitat will get destroyed. I think you can see what my opinion is on that system. So yeah, you've got a couple of options there, Josh, but you don't say whether you've already had any survey work carried out. It depends on the time of year. You know, if you're early in the year, you can have eDNA. I think it's May to June, or is it June to mid-June? It's May to June, I think. And you can have population assessments carried out and all that kind of good stuff. If you're later in the year, then it's going to delay you potentially for 6 months. So it really does depend what survey work you've had carried out up to this point. I've got another one here from an Ellie in Bournemouth who, this is specific to our business actually. She says, do you cover surveys for planning appeals too, or is that a separate? Yeah, I mean, it's planning appeals are immensely complicated, Ellie, and you know, you have to really dig into the background of the site history and all that kind of good stuff. So happy to discuss that offline, but it's not really one for the podcast. Laura in Hull says, we've just bought a site and we need to move really fast. That old chestnut. How quickly can you get a report turned around? This is not about promoting my business, so I'm not going to speak about my business specifically, but what I would say is that most, and you don't say whether it's trees or ecology, so I'll lump everything together, most arboricultural and ecological consultancies will be 5 to 10 days, probably up to 15 days to get to site, and then they'll turn the report round usually within a couple of weeks. Some companies like us will offer a accelerated service to get that done a little bit quicker, but I think there's a bigger point there, Laura. I think, you know, I would exercise caution there. This is not something you ever want to rush at. A lot of people, particularly smaller property developers, have these sites, and there's massive financial pressure to get everything boxed off quickly, and it really isn't the best way. So you need to build that in, get some good solid advice early on in the process. And I've just got time here for one more. Let's have a look. Sandeep from Bromley says, we're building in stages. Do we need new ecology surveys each time? It's way too broad, Sandeep. Possibly yes, possibly no. If you are building in phases, you obviously need to have an understanding of what the potential ecological constraints are across the whole site as a whole. So even if you're going to build it up in stages, I would potentially look at the whole site as a whole to start with. And then it may be, we had this on a site recently with badgers, is that original PEA had been done. It identified badgers on the site. Phase 1 didn't affect the badger set, but by the time they got to phase 3, it did. So they had kicked the can down the road for a few years, but then they did need to repeat all the surveys to support a license application. So it's very, very site specific, Sandeep. So that is it for Panic Line today. So let's go back to our episode here. So yeah, I mean, essentially just to sum this one up really, in terms of causes of delays, it's normally underfunded LPAs, shoddy submissions and overstretched planning officers. If you want better planning, then really, you know, it needs to be funded better by central government. But what you can do is make sure that your application is absolutely as robust as it possibly can do, and that starts with looking at the site very early on, because at the end of the day, planning isn't broken because of nature, it's broken because of neglect. And my new phrase from the last podcast, what was it? Respect and protect. There we go. I'm going to get that on a t-shirt. Respect and protect. And that's it from me this week, folks. If you like what you're listening to here, it would really help us out if you would give us a little subscribe. We'll put a link to the newsletter as well that I put out each week, which is not at all salesy. It's just full of useful facts and tips to help you get your planning back on track. So that's it for me for this week, and I'll catch you on the next one.